This program is brought to you by realestate.com.au, Australia's #1 address in property. With more properties for sale than anywhere else, we make it easier.
Thanks for being with us here on Business Now. Let's take a look at the results from auction markets around the country. And look, nationally, it was pretty strong, you'd have to say. The clearance rate, 60.6% from more than 1,500 auctions. In Sydney, there were 561 auctions. The clearance rate there, a very healthy 62.2%. In Melbourne, there were 619 auctions. The clearance rate in Melbourne was 67.9%. Again, very strong. In Brisbane, just 37 auctions. The clearance rate here again has ticked up 48.6%. Adelaide, it had 48 auctions and a clearance rate of 58.3%. And in the ACT, there were 51 auctions and the clearance rate there was 60.8%. So strong, but of grave concern to governments and the real estate industry is that the level of first home buyers right now is the lowest it's been since 2017. In January, first home buyers were down 8.3%. So let's bring in Angus, Economist with REA Group. And Angus, first buyer activity, it peaked around about 2 years ago, and it's been a sharp fall off. Is this of concern?
Yeah, so we certainly saw a lot of first home buyers during 2021. To put in context, there are about 160,000 across the calendar year in 2021. That's the second strongest year we've had in basically 2 decades and only just behind 2009. So a lot of first home buyers. Big reason for that is we saw interest rates fall a lot. We know first home buyers borrow a lot of what they're paying for their house. Many of them don't even have the 20% deposit. And so the big increase in interest rates we've seen has really crimped back on what they're able to borrow and therefore, pushed a lot of them out of the market.
And you can see it on the chart right here, right now, and that is it's a really serious fall, and yet it seems as though they had a moment when interest rates you could borrow at 1%. These are going to be a lot of the people who have got the fixed rate loans, the 800,000 people who'll be coming off those loans over the course of this year. So they're the ones who are potentially most vulnerable as those loans end and they're suddenly confronted with a mortgage with a 5 or a 6 in front of it.
There'll certainly be some that are in that boat, particularly if they bought towards the end of 2021. We know there were a lot across 2021, but even if you bought in early 2021, prices across that year alone were up 23%. So if you bought in February, March, April, you're still sitting on an enormous gain across.
The problem is that that's not cash, is it? So admittedly, while those people have jobs, they can find ways to cut back. They may have a little bit more equity in their home, so it's a buffer they've got with the bank, but really it's not enough because they've still got to find the cash to pay the mortgage.
Certainly, right. There's the difference between serviceability and the ability to upgrade your wealth. So yes, you're exactly right. Whether they're able to pay the mortgage depends predominantly on their interest repayments to some extent, but certainly whether they have a job. We know one of the biggest predictors of mortgage arrears and mortgage default is unemployment. At the moment, unemployment, at least in aggregate, remains very low. We're around sort of 50-year lows in unemployment and have been for much of the past 12 months. So from that perspective, keeping people in jobs helps keep them in their mortgages, but certainly there'll be some for which it will be tough as that interest rate rolls off and they jump to much higher mortgage repayments.
Because the one thing that's not being seen in the market to any extent whatsoever, you're not seeing it in the bank's results. Their bad and doubtful debts are very, very low, which is part of the reason why they got such strong profits. You're not seeing any distressed sales coming up in the real estate markets. That again is another sign of stress in the whole system. So there's none of that around the place at this stage.
Not at this stage. We wouldn't expect bank asset quality to deteriorate very quickly. Obviously it takes a long time to flow from kind of difficulties paying your mortgage to mortgage stress to arrears to default. That's a long process, and most people, particularly if you've seen a big increase in your equity, will be able to find other pathways out. Be that selling the home, be that refinancing into a different product. But for some, there will certainly be strain.
There's one other stat that came out last week, which was building approvals. Now, building approvals have also dropped off a cliff because the construction industry is in troubles. That's another area where you can see potentially this is the reason why rents are starting to rise. This is the reason why in the longer term you can start to see the seeds for the next boom in housing as well.
Right. If you look, at the fundamentals, housing demand remains really strong, and you're seeing that in rents, right? Rents are where fundamentally the number of houses and the number of people have to match up, and at the moment they're sort of not. Vacancy rates are incredibly low, rents are growing extremely quickly. So, in fundamental terms, housing demand is really strong, and as you say, if we're not building more homes to accommodate more people, particularly with migration returning, that's going to put a floor under prices.
Yeah, Angus Moore, always great to get you from the RAA Group. Many thanks for your time.